real pressure to be anything, my friend, but a nice friend to speak with. I follow your Instagram account.
Yeah.
Which is why you're on my brain, having moved past going to Yoga Hive where I first met you. That was probably a year ago or more now. I love the page. You know, your contribution as far as positivity in my feed is like a few things. You know what I mean? I'm trying to be more diligent these days with chopping things out of my feed that I don't feel like are great for me. Do you know what I mean? Or my overall headspace, you know? I've been more, what's the word? Ruthlessly unfollowing certain folks. You know, I can always pop back in, but I really, really dig what you're doing.
Thanks.
Yeah. I saw you went to Austin recently.
Yeah, just got back a week ago. I was just there for a week. I was teaching Bikram classes, and I did a vinyasa workshop there.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
I lived there for a few years.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What years?
It was maybe, I just got back, not last September, but September before. So it was probably, let's see if I ended in 2016. I was there for about 3 years.
Cool. What were you doing down there?
I followed a lady friend. She moved for work. She was working at Apple.
Uh-huh.
And I got a job at Whole Foods Market, which was based down in Austin.
Yeah. So
it was a cool place to be for the time being. That was before the whole Amazon acquisition.
Oh.
They have a very different, what's the word? They have a very different air to things these days. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was kind of a good thing because I reduced my Whole Food visits.
Nice.
I'd be going to Trader Joe's more often.
That's a great place too.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, they have a lot of good stuff.
Produce isn't the best, but you know, it's alright.
Do you do a lot of cooking yourself?
No, I wish I'd do more, do some.
I can appreciate that.
I end up a lot of nights I end up just teaching until about like 8 o'clock or later. So then it's like I don't feel like cooking. I'm just gonna go out and eat.
I watch a lot of chefs on YouTube.
Yeah.
People like Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah.
The guy that trained him, Marco White, does a lot of online stuff.
Oh, cool.
And it's cool to see that second generation guy from England who's brusque but also wise. Do you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
He says this thing all the time. If it's going to be a chore for you or a job for you, just pick something up.
Yeah.
You know, and to your point about you get out at 8 o'clock and cooking's not going to be a fun experience, you might as well find something great to eat that you can just stop off and get.
Yeah, I end up not eating that much during the day, and then I mean, this is contrary to a lot of advice given, but just because I'm always active and I'm always doing yoga a lot, I like to not have that much food to digest during the day. I feel like digestion slows me down.
I get that.
So I want to slow down at nighttime. So I usually eat a heavy meal at like 8, 9 o'clock, which, you know, a lot of people say not to, but I mean, I don't know. And then I end up, you know, usually when I was in Austin, I wasn't really I was kind of fasting during the day. I'd do like a smoothie, but I would just be doing yoga and teaching it. And so, I don't know, there's just something about, I don't know for sure, but I feel like, you know, I'm gaining energy, I'm gaining prana while I'm practicing yoga, and then I'm staying really present and mindfully teaching the yoga. So it's just like, I don't really need to feed anything at that point.
I can dig it.
But then it's at some point it's just like, okay, I need to come back down there.
I definitely feel that. And eating something we all have to do.
But
and you're right, you don't want to do it super right before going to bed, but sometimes that's tough.
Yeah, I feel like too, it's a little different. Everybody's a little bit different, but I feel just like the whole, if you need to like cut some calories, cut some fat from your body, then probably. But if you don't, I still feel like it's just putting that amount of time. It's just putting a fast in there. That whole intermittent fasting thing.
Right on. I'm
kind of doing it. I'm not. They say do 16 fast, 8 space to eat, and I do a little bit more, like maybe 10, 14.
Cool.
But I don't know why.
You're right that everyone's different too.
Yeah.
And that lands for me. I've been one of those cats that tries to not eat after 8, but then I won't eat the next day until like 1 or 2 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of created this just habitual thing. And then when I heard that it was somewhat beneficial to intermittently fast, I was like, well, I'm already in that category.
Yeah.
I can never really eat early in the morning. You know, I don't have a firing appetite until like the afternoon. Even if I rise at like 6 or 7, I'm still not really hungry until later.
Yeah, I like to do yoga on an empty stomach. That's the other thing too, especially I do a lot of hot yoga, so you can't really have food in your
big
stomach.
meal. Yeah.
You can't really have any food because, again, with the digestion, it's more blood is going to your digestive organs to digest whatever's in your stomach, and there's less blood available for your heart and your lungs, which is really where you can use it the most, and especially a hot yoga class.
For real. Your nose breath reminded me of how I've been trying to make a regular thing with a neti pot, doing like a nasal rinse.
Yeah.
There was a video I saw where a yoga academy in India, the classmates in the morning as a ritual do a rinse, and then some like breathing exercises where they're turning their head and doing these nose breaths, and they do it as a team, and it just had this awesome look to it. I've never had a super clean nose breath.
Yeah.
I've always either been in an allergy season or something along those lines, and I feel like I'm not getting the full amount of oxygen. So I've been trying to use the neti pot as a means of achieving that, and it's crazy how much that thing is super helpful. Put a little Himalayan salt, that like pharmaceutical grade salt, into some water and rinse like that. It reminds me of like being in the ocean. You know, you get that salt water in your head feeling. You know.
Yeah, I miss that feeling. Yeah, my ex-partner used to do neti pot, but I just really feel that like, you know, a little bit of congestion here or there, but you know, I still get as much air as I need, I feel. Then, you know, there is a type of pranayama that I will do in my morning practice. I don't do it all that often, but, you know, you probably know it, the alternate nostril breathing. So it's usually not as, I mean, there's different variations of it, and one that it seems like you just described with the people you've seen doing the neti pot, and then is a version, but then the one I do is a little bit slower, you know, kind of inhale for about 4 count and then a hold, and then you go out through the other.
I haven't seen that. I can really dig the isolation of one nostril at a time.
But yeah, that tends to get me a little bit clearer after, you know, about
this is something
2
I
minutes.
need to try. I appreciate this sharing moment.
And what was I going to say about that? Oh, and the other thing is that one nostril typically is more clear than the other one at any given time during the day, and it usually like switches. I can't remember how many hours, maybe 8 hours, maybe 12 hours or less. So if you ever notice, like, I don't know how that, I'm gonna have to look it up, but I have read before that that's the case, and so that's a good way to balance it out on the physical level. And then, you know, the whole energy level, that's hard to quantify.
For sure.
But it's,
Good way
man, it feels like, yeah, if it feels like it's working, then that's good enough for me.
I can appreciate that sentiment 100%. Yeah, that's nice to individual nostril. Do you find yourselves like popping your ears or ever relieving the pressure in your ears as a regular thing?
Not so much.
I had a friend who joked that he does that as much as people crack their knuckles. He finds himself holding his nose and trying to relieve that pressure.
Yeah, it can be habitual. I feel like, what do I do? I feel like I have like a little bit of a knot or a gland in like the back of my throat or my jaw or my neck, and I feel like I'll hit that a little bit too often maybe. But yeah, you know.
I feel that.
You mentioned my Instagram account. For those listening at home, hey, why not give that a follow? It's Michael Miracles Yoga. Wait, how do you tell people about Instagram? I think that's all you need is Michael Miracles Yoga.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely appreciate the page. It's one of those things that's actually inspiring in the sense of you get depth of pose. That is one of those things where I don't have accessibility to part of those. And so it's like, wow, that's a place to work to.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason I really dig it. But the other thing is the time you take writing your captions is clearly well thought out. I appreciate those deep moments too.
Yeah, that's what I like the most about it, is it's given me a container to write about yoga and spirituality and mindfulness a lot more than I would normally. And then the writing then influences my teaching a bit, and then vice versa.
Cool.
This is stuff that will pop up in class. The photos as much, I mean, honestly, I don't really enjoy doing that much.
I can appreciate that.
Because it's like, I want to do yoga. I don't want to just like pose for it, and then it's like, I I need to take the time to try. Usually I don't have it to try to warm up first instead of just like throwing my body into these really deep, advanced poses. But I just remind myself that it's cool while it lasts, and I'm grateful that I'm able to do those things. And the reason I'm doing it too isn't just like, hey everybody, look what I can do. It's almost more like grab people's attention and then bring them into the writing. The writing is what's more important to me. I feel like that's more useful than it's almost undeniably more useful than just looking at a picture of me.
That's an effective strategy because your photos do exactly that. You're like, whoa, how do I get into, let's say, a camel that deep?
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching it and it's like something to work for, and then you see the caption and it's definitely working the way that you lined it out, at least for me.
Cool.
Definitely. Michael Miracles. Do you ever have cats run up to you in the streets of Pittsburgh and go, I know you?
Yeah, well, that does happen, but I've been around for a while. So before the yoga career, it was music,
cool,
and parties. So there's a whole bunch of different things people might know me for.
I can dig it,
but I consider myself a C-list Pittsburgh celebrity.
I love it. That's awesome.
So that's. But I would even be higher, I think, if it weren't for all the worship of the sports teams. So it's like there's all the Steelers, Penguins, and the Pirates pushing me down. I would be like a B-level celebrity in another mid to low size city.
Nice.
But the sports team worship in the city is undeniable.
It's probably unparalleled for most places.
Yeah, people like their sports teams in other places too.
That's true. True.
This is definitely in the.
I speak as a biased native.
Yeah, no, I mean people go crazy. Like one of my first memories is my dad like putting me in front of this TV for a Steeler game. He had like a deck of playing cards with like the Steelers on the back of it, and like lining up playing cards in front of the TV. The TVs used to be like giant pieces of furniture back then. Some of the people listening at home like, what are you talking about? It's a flat screen. Yeah, it used to be like this giant, like huge chest of
cabinet.
Yeah, like a huge cabinet of some sort. I don't even know how they got them into houses, but yeah, that's my favorite.
I can dig that.
Some of my first memory.
That's awesome. Yeah, sports go back here. I always heard this phrase that Pittsburgh isn't a sports town with a drinking problem, we're a drinking town with a sports problem.
Yeah.
And so there's a reputation for rowdiness there. It's not overly rowdy, but hey, you got to have a good time all the time, and we seem to be pretty good at it.
Yeah, it's not Philadelphia. We don't throw snowballs and batteries at Santa Claus. Unless provoked, probably. If Santa Claus showed up with like some Patriots are probably more of a instigator now than the Browns are.
That's a good way of saying it. Yeah.
But I'm not. We could keep talking about. I don't think sports is the direction I really wanted to go.
No,
but you had said, the people come up to me on the street. I don't know. Sometimes they do. But I like that because I just like I like people now. So I like to talk to people, and yeah.
That's cool.
If you see me out on the streets of Pittsburgh, come and say hi. I've been being told a lot recently that I have doppelgangers out there too, so don't be confused.
Make sure you got the right Michael Miracles in front of you. That's cool.
Yeah, and then I guess the other thing I'll say about that too is my last name isn't actually Miracles. Sometimes people will be like, "Is your last name really Miracles?" I'm like, "No, not at all." In case you're wondering, I took the last name, or not the last name, I took the word Miracles and applied it to my brand because of a book called A Course in Miracles. Have you ever heard of it?
I saw your post regarding this.
Yeah.
That was the first I had heard of it.
Okay. So those also, I'm assuming there's probably like millions of people listening to this. Not just but all of those millions of people listening out there. A Course in Miracles, should I give the whole spiel? What A Course in Miracles
please. Yeah.
A Course in Miracles is a really interesting book. I've never really came across. I started getting into spirituality more, or I guess at all, maybe around like 2013, 2014. But that was part of it. That was one of the first things I was introduced to. And it's the story behind it goes as such. In the late 60s, early 70s, in Columbia University in New York City, their psychology department in the teaching school of psychology, there was apparently a lot of turmoil between the members of the faculty. And so a woman named Helen Schumann, which I think that's the pronunciation, Helen Schumann was one of these members of the faculty, and at the time she had described herself as, she was born Jewish, but at the time she identified as being an aggressive atheist. Okay. Anyway, at some point she was just so frustrated with this, I guess it was constant bickering, just, really toxic environment at work, and she, I guess, had tried to figure out ways, being a psychologist, to figure this stuff out, and then she got to a point where she just reached a point of surrender, basically. Not giving up, it's different. Finding a point of surrender is different than giving up and quitting, but she basically, as the story goes, came to a point where, I don't know, I can't think my way out of this. I can't figure out the answer, and I'm open to anything.
Yes.
I want a solution to I want peace in this situation, and I'm open to anything. So shortly after she came to that point, she had a dream where she was presented with 2 scrolls, and the voice in this dream said, pick the scroll on the left and you'll know everything about the past. And so and then said on the other one, pick the scroll on the right and you'll know everything about the future. And so what she said was, I choose neither. I want the present moment.
Nice.
And the voice said, congratulations, you passed the test this time. That's strange. And so shortly thereafter, she started to hear a voice in her head that said, this is A Course in Miracles, please take notes. So she went in, and to one of her coworkers that she was, having turmoil with, she just confided with them, like, hey, I think I'm going crazy. I'm hearing this voice in my head. It's saying, this is A Course in Miracles, please take notes. And his name is Bill Stepford, I think. Yeah, I think that's the guy. He said, well, I don't know, write it down, bring it in, let's see what it says. And I don't know why I include this detail, I just think it's funny.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Record it. Do us a test, see where it goes.
But she ended up saying at that point, well, I'll write it down, but if it starts using bad grammar, I'm stopping.
Nice.
That's like
that was the rule.
That's kind of I guess that's the kind of lady she was.
I can dig it.
So next day or how many ever days later, she came back. She wrote it down, and she's like, here it is. I don't know. He started reading. He was like, this isn't crazy at all. This is kind of powerful. So 7 years later, we got A Course in Miracles.
Awesome.
She ended up writing it freehand, bringing it into him, and he would kind of edit it a little bit and type it up. And it turns out that 75% of it was written in iambic what's the word? Pentameter. Yeah, which is what Shakespeare wrote in, which is kind of interesting as well.
And she almost channeled it.
That's what it is. I mean, that's what it is. And I feel hesitant.
And it just so happens
I always tell the whole story
iambic.
Because I'm coming from a very skeptical place before my spiritual awakening.
Fair enough.
Whereas, if someone was like, yeah, this is channeled.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah. And still to this day, I feel like I sit on the fence where it's like, I don't know if I completely believe. I don't really completely believe the story. But I think it's possible. But I also think I don't really care because the result of it, whether it was channeled, whether it was just brilliant, and they must have at least been brilliant to have brought forth this work. And again, A Course in Miracles is it's written in Christian terminology, which it can be very off-putting as well. And it kind of was to me, but again, I'm not going to discount it just because it says the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But the content, I was raised Catholic, so I have a little bit of a understanding before I rejected it very hard at age 13 or 14. A little bit of understanding, remembering about all that stuff. So
yeah.
But the content is completely different than what I at least remember from Christianity, and the content's a lot more what resembles Buddhism or a non-dual philosophy, which basically means that there's just oneness in reality, which is borrowed from the Hindu philosophies and religions. But that's the so we ended up with about 700 pages of text, and then the other cool thing about it is the second section is the workbook, and in the workbook it's 365 like daily meditations. And then the whole book's designed to get you out of the fear mindset and bring you more into they say Christ consciousness, but a better way, I mean, a more layman's terms, not in layman's, but more secular, I don't know, whatever way of putting it, I would say just be your best self, your best mindset.
Right on.
And it's kind of a training factor for that. And then there's like a short third section at the end, and it's like the manual for teachers. But basically, once you learn A Course in Miracles, you're going to start teaching it.
Well, that's cool. I've never really seen a book that was not only it's sharing value, but has a somewhat, hey, let me empower you to now be the preacher of this book. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and
it's very cool.
It's not so much preaching it either, and that's what I like about it as well. It's, I don't know if it actually says this, but this is my take on it, and this is what I love about yoga too. It's like, you don't have to believe any of this. Try it out and see if it works. You still don't have to believe it if it's working.
Right on.
Just have to practice it
and
see if it works. And that's what I love about it. Again, like I said, I was coming from a very skeptical. I was atheist for a good amount of time, and then so that really broke things open. I got at the same time. This is when I got exposed to this. I did my first teacher training in 2011, yoga teacher training, and I'm not going to say the name of the place because I'm going to say this. I didn't really learn how to teach very well from the place. So, I mean, it wasn't a bad experience, but after the end of the training, I didn't really feel like I could teach a class. I started doing it anyway. I threw myself in the fire because I kind of felt like I didn't really have too many more choices at that point.
Well, that's a good way to go.
Yeah. But about a little bit over a year in, I heard about this other teacher training school in Rhode Island called Live, Love, Teach. Shout outs to Live, Love, Teach. They're the ones that taught me how to teach yoga to how I can teach now.
Nice.
But at the same time, my teacher there, Philip Urso, he was also a teacher of Course in Miracles. He was doing podcasts back in the early 2000s, before they were probably even called podcasts. But he got a lot of juice on his podcast for iTunes because he was one of the first generation of that. So that exists if you want an easy, accessible way into A Course in Miracles. Check out his old podcasts. They're called A Crash Course in Miracles. They're free for download.
Nice. I like the spin, Crash Course in Miracles.
Yeah. But anyway, went to that teacher training, so I got simultaneously exposed to the spiritual teachings. And I've tended to use coin the phrase practical spirituality, meaning it's something that you can practice and experience, and that's like the proof, like evidence that something's happening, like at least a feeling, or And I have nothing against more what I would consider like esoteric or new agey spirituality. I mean, you could consider probably Course in Miracles new agey too, depending on the lens you put it under. But I have nothing against any of that. I think it's cool, and then especially what you'll find in yoga a lot too is a lot of bringing lip service to Hindu, Indian deities. All good there too. I've just never felt any direct. I just felt no real connection to any of them. And I think they're cool. Ganesha and Hanuman and Shiva and all those. Like but like I never really felt, nor have I ever really seen other people. I don't know. I guess I can't speak for anybody else for myself. So, but anyway. Practical spirituality, and at the same time at that teacher training, that's what really did it for me. It's like, here's ways to teach yoga that are super effective that you can definitely do, and at the same time, here's what yoga really is, how it works, and here's how you personally, being the student, and how your students for your future yoga classes can start to really benefit from the teachings, not just physically on the mat, not just a little bit mentally on the mat, but how to have lasting changes that stick with you throughout the day, and to start learning how to apply yogic techniques, mindfulness techniques in the real world. And then you're kind of in a bubble when you're on your yoga mat, But when push comes to shove, especially in relationships, be it a significant other or others, or your family, or your coworkers, which are of course I think spawned from. That's where push comes to shove. And I'll just go on record to saying, from my experience, a lot of yoga classes out there aren't checking those boxes off. And a lot of them are. I think I think it's good. It's a good thing that rather than someone being sedentary and just sitting on their couch, it's a lot better for them to go to a class that isn't actually giving them all that, because they're moving. If they're going to move, if they're going to on a regular basis move, almost everyone needs to do that, unless you have a job that keeps you moving all the time. Humans need to move for many reasons. I don't know if I should even go into all those, but fairly obvious on the physical level for sure. But on an energetic level, which then connects to your mind as well, you gotta move. Maybe I will start a little bit. Just briefly, it's because we seemingly on this level of reality evolved from hominoid primates. And what made us evolve was this heightened sense of fight or flight sympathetic nervous system. It's just acuteness to anything dangerous. And there was a ton of dangers when we were, I'm going to stop that buzzing.
It's quite all right.
Oh. This is a toy phone. Anyway, we had so many dangers, lots of tiger, a lot of predator. We were not at the top of the food chain. We were on the savannah, or just come down from the trees and trying to make a go of it. The snakes, everything. That's real clear and present danger. So we developed, get out of there, pick up a rock and defend yourself. You need it. And there's nothing wrong with that. We still need that maybe once or twice in our lifetimes.
Fair enough.
But hopefully never, sometimes never. But what ends up happening is there's all these low-level triggers to our sympathetic nervous system where, someone says something about against the politician you like, and you're like, and so a lot of it's driving, get cut off and you can't, the best you can do is scream and yell, and that has consequences to it. Maybe not if you're by yourself and you're doing it I just like doing it as a relief, and then you just let it go. But that's not really my technique. I like to go into the breathing.
I can relate.
But I think so nowadays we need to get that extra energy out. A challenging yoga class is a great way to doing it, or any sort of challenging to semi-challenging. Working out is good too. But what tends to happen in a lot of workouts, your routines, you're on the treadmill, you're looking at a screen, you have your music in your ears, you're just trying to distract yourself from what you're doing. It's not mindfulness, it's not meditation. You get the benefits of what it's doing for your body, which is great, but you get the benefits of getting some of that energy out. So you run hard for an hour straight, you're going to feel pretty darn good afterwards.
Oh yeah.
But you're not making those extra connections. And I try to think about it as much as possible of how what we say, what we do, how we act connects to how we think. And so even on a physical level, in which A Course in Miracles trains us on the physical realm to work within this, but it also informs us that there's probably a lot more at play ultimately. And that again aligns with non-dualistic Hindu philosophy, but certain types of Buddhism as well. Anyway, what was I saying? So yeah, I'm just going to spin it back around. A lot of yoga classes are just more like physical workouts, and they're teaching distraction a lot of the time. And this is my controversial thing, it seems, is I advocate don't play music in your classes. I love music. I end up playing music a lot of time. Yeah. It's not in classes, but and it's not wrong. It's not bad for people. I don't know, but it's not yoga. You're training people's minds. You're training them on the level of thought and in action. The only way that you can get relief from your thoughts is if you distract yourself. And that's what is really has been permeating yoga more and more as the years go by. When the competition is getting more and more fierce, it's like, what gimmicks can we bring in? And all those gimmicks is actually, and I think all of them or a lot of them are pulling people away from what yoga really is.
Fair enough.
Essentially it's teaching the opposite or something other than yoga. Again, it's not horrible. People are still moving, which is good, but you'd almost be better off doing a different type of, there's more effective, if you're like, I'm just in it for the body, I don't care about my mind, I don't care about any of that other stupid yoga stuff. There's probably more effective workouts that people could be doing
That's a good point.
than yoga. But, well, you know, that I could go either way on that, because, you know, yoga is always also, even, you know, very new beginner teachers, they're still delivering a lot of people tend to not stretch as much as they do anaerobic exercise and aerobic exercise. So it's, you know, yoga is still a great option even if you don't want to do yoga.
Let me tell you this, when I met you at Yoga Hive, your vinyasa class was the first time I experienced that true connection between one movement, one breath. The class was fast-paced. It was probably the most fast-paced vinyasa I had been to.
Yeah, I remember.
And that
I remember
forced
you guys
me
were getting a little
to
slow.
be, what's the word, more aware of breath in, breath out, breath in, breath out. Because it was almost a dance I was doing. Do you know what I mean? It was a true flow, let's put it that way. I walked away from that class. Let's listen, before I even walked away from that class, we reached Shavasana, and I'm sitting there still at the end of the class in this final corpse pose, feeling lots of new sensations. Some of it was like you've used like maybe a color going by over my closed eyelids. You'll feel things. Some of it's emotional. Do you know what I mean? But the idea of following you, which created this routine in a breath in, breath out, breath in, breath out sequence, was just not an experience I had had before. What you explained about how most classes are giving you an exercise and not a practice in yoga, as far as breath connection, that was one of the first eye-opening moments I had. Your vinyasa class was probably one of the things that led me to be more regular about my home practice.
Oh, that's good.
You know, it was empowering in the sense of, wow, what I just did felt new, although I've gone to a place seeking that same thing on more than a dozen occasions.
Well, thanks for sharing that. It makes me feel good. Like, I don't get that feedback very often. I'm just assuming that it's happening more than people tell me. You know, I'll get, you know, people occasionally saying the same thing. The thing I firstly want to say is the reason why I love to do it is because that's what really affected me the most too. I had been practicing yoga for, I don't know, it's about 6 years or so before I experienced, again, I went to Live, Love, Teach and Philip Urso. He's the one who, as far as I know, was the only one to really refine it to that point. And everybody, some people out there who might be like yoga teachers or go to yoga class, like, yeah, no, we do one breath, one movement. It's just not, it's just these little precise things that you can do with the timing and when you call the breath and how you cue the pose that facilitate that feeling. And when you're really, truly connecting, it doesn't even have to be one breath, but it shows up the most, one breath per movement. You have to pay attention to do that. So you're actually having a mindful experience too. And when you really get the hang of that, and when you really get your lungs strong, you could do a lot more than you think. Your body can do a lot more than you think, and it just becomes more so ease. Like, not to say it's easy, but you're practicing it with a sense of grace and a sense of ease. And,
oh yes.
And you still get a little bit of that, but it's really interesting to watch. Like I don't want to be so negative, but I don't go to other people's vinyasa classes because I can't deal. Once I've had it this way, I can't, and I can't listen. I mean, I can't.
Not knowing what value you're going to get.
I mean, I can toss a football with somebody in a backyard, or I could do it in the middle of a busy street. I'm going to choose to do it in the backyard. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
And then some people are like, no, you'll get better at football if you're doing it. And I'm like, well, I don't. Yeah, I guess I'd have a little bit more wherewithal to be like, I'm blocking out that frigging cliched yoga song I've heard on everybody's playlist over and over and over again. Anyway, what was my words? Oh yeah, and so I guess this is a good time to plug I'm doing my second teacher training now. I'm learning.
Cool.
I'm leading my second teacher training, so it's a good thing that I guess I'm on my promotional tour now.
Yes, sir.
That's starting the weekend of October, first weekend of October, the 4th through the 6th.
Cool.
And it can be. I'm doing the full 200 hours. So if you're looking for a 200-hour training, it's not too late to sign up. But also, it's the first 2 weekends are designed for people who want just get a taste of it and just want to try it out, even if they're like, I don't think teaching's for me, but I want to go deeper into the practice. That's for that too. And at the same time, I'm offering continuing education credits for people who've already done 200 hours, because there's so many Vinyasa yoga teachers out there who could benefit from this technique, and the technique is refined. It's down to a science, It's the other thing too is like I've hit a point of essentially mastery with it, where it's so natural. I got it to a high point, but someone just starting to learn, someone just taking their first teacher training the first weekend, these steps are here. It's like, okay, it's repeatable. It's here's how you do it. A lot of problems with a lot of other trainings, and especially the first one I took, and from just secondhand information, me seeing how other ones have run, they don't give a lot of clear cut. They'll tell you how to do some things, but it's not this method, And the other thing too is, I don't want. They don't really say you don't practice it very much. You don't practice teaching very much. So in my training too, there's a lot of practice teaching, and live feedback, and immediate feedback, and opportunity to try again. What happens in some trainings is you won't get an opportunity to teach a class, or at least more than just a few minutes of a class up until like near the end. And then you finally get your point to go. Almost everyone gets nervous in that situation. Not every single person, but everyone gets kind of nervous, and the tendency is you're gonna not have the best go of it, and then you get some feedback, usually harshly, and then it's like, okay, you're done. Then you're stewing on that for months, or who knows how long, days, weeks, months. Anyway, so there's a specific technique, and I call it Unity Vinyasa. My teachers at Live, Love, Teach call it synchronized vinyasa. So I basically took what they're doing, and even I think I improved it a little bit more. I'm able to work. I have a lot of background in Bikram yoga as well, and say what you will about that type of yoga. There's a lot of benefit, a lot of powerful benefits to it. And one thing that I'm able to get really good at because of that is that's more based on body cues. So they don't really use the breath.
Interesting.
It's more just like the way that it works, the way that the yoga comes through is you're just giving really good cues that work. Like even if it's something as simple as like stretch your rib cage up, and you just do it, and you start to learn to like try to move exactly with how the teacher is moving. So then at that point you're having a mindfulness experience. When you even something like squeeze your right thigh, and you do it, it's like I don't know, it might be boring for some non-yoga teachers, but that's another area where a lot of teaching isn't as powerful as it can be, because the cues get convoluted. The cues become, a lot of people, like, instead of saying squeeze your right thigh, they'd say something like your thigh is squeezing. You know what I mean? They'll cue out of the passive tense, or they'll put like a flowery metaphor in it. And all that time is time waste to where you can have that direct connection of movement and breathing and everything happening in a timed logic. I don't even know if logical is the right word. But
I'm sure precision of language when you're giving a cue is hard. You want to say the right thing. You don't want to say 7 words if 3 words will do it.
Yeah, that's the thing though. It's sometimes it's harder to say like minimum relevant wording, maximum effect.
Yeah.
Cue action verbs.
Right on.
And directly. Like you, your. Sometimes, the is not a crime, like the leg, but it's
filler.
It's a little bit of a filler, but it's almost a disassociation, where that part of the class, you want to, I feel that's direct. So and then like something, this is going into the minutia of it a little bit. A lot of times, even the more traditional forms of yoga, which are pretty darn good, I would rather do like an Ashtanga class than most modern, but Ashtanga doesn't even use, and that's where most of the modern vinyasa has derived itself from.
Cool.
But Ashtanga doesn't even use the breath as well as it can.
Interesting.
It'll say inhale and then do the thing. So you're already breathing in and you already got the lungs in, so you can't actually use that feeling of breathing and moving at the same time. And then when it comes to lifting your body up, if your lungs are empty and then you breathe in, it helps you lift with less effort.
I can dig it.
Anyway.
No, I appreciate what you're saying, especially about teacher trainings too. It's good to hear you mention the trainings coming up. I'm sure there are a lot of places where you can go and, like you say, maybe not get the best value out of something.
Yeah.
Whereas from all the places I've been to in Austin and in here, in the city of Pittsburgh, like, your classes were stand out.
Oh, thanks for saying
You know
that.
what I mean? They stood out for obvious reasons. You know what I mean? You went and you felt it, and you talked to the person next to you, and they were like, "Yeah, that felt fast." You know, it's like, yeah, but it was a good fast. You know what I mean? It's like you say, you got to move. You know, I found yoga while I was living in Austin. Living in Austin was where I was dealt the blow of being told that my dad had passed.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, man. It was okay. You know, he was a great dude, and I was lucky to have a dad for the amount of time that I did. His name was Anthony. He was 57. And so I thought about where I was. I'm down here on the island of Central Texas, and my family's back up here in Pennsylvania, and I get this news, and I come up and I do the burial, and then I go back, and I'm on this island again, and I'm there with my partner, and I'm sitting there feeling all this, and it's like, how do you quiet? How do you be okay with what that is? You know, how do you find your new normal?
Mm-hmm.
And meditation came first, which just led me to yoga, because like you say, humans have to move. So I'm like, how do I combine my meditation with some kind of movement? Oh, yoga, of course. It was like right there. Do you know what I mean? So I get into that, and it really, was transformative and instrumental in feeling better about maintaining my headspace. Because there are days where I'm going to feel darker. There are days where I'm going to wake up in the morning and feel super dark. But it's not an all-day thing. It all passes. Emotional stuff. One of the most comforting things I learned in my journey of grieving Dad was an emotion can only really be present biologically for like 45 seconds.
Yeah.
It's your thoughts contributing to the fire that make it burn for any longer than that.
It can be it usually is a feedback loop. You feel an emotion is just a thought with sensation in the body. So you have the thought which creates the sensation in the body.
Oh yeah.
And that's what you would call an emotion. But then you end up typically feeding that back into another thought. Boom, 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 boom. So it just keeps feeding back. And since you have some sound experience, like if we would have hold this microphone up to a speaker, eventually it turns into this screeching, piercing. Yeah. And that's where at least a lot of people who are going through a tough situation, or, you know, have experienced trauma, or just living in this modern society, even if it has, you know, just
being a human is its own form of suffering.
Yeah.
And like the Buddhists say, like, there's meaning in the suffering. It's okay that we're all suffering in some degree of spectrum suffering. Being in a body, in a sense,
right.
This temporary vessel that I find myself in.
And that's what yoga was invented for. It's to relieve the suffering.
Right on.
But I would just say I agree with the Buddhists to a certain extent, but there's I wouldn't even say there's meaning in the suffering. I'd say there's opportunity for healing and growth.
Fair enough.
And learning.
Yeah, there's value in the suffering.
There can be.
Yes.
But what the mistake that can be made is you just latch on to that suffering. You latch on to whatever you feel the source of that suffering is, and you turn it into whatever you turn it. But the spiritual path that I follow, and yoga in general would advise to, you definitely have to see it. That's like the first. I think the first step to having an awakening. You can call it whatever you will. You can just be like, this is the first step to being more mentally at peace. But that's the first step, is starting to see your thoughts, like witness them. Because before I was on to any of this stuff, before yoga, before any of this stuff, I didn't know that there was a separate. Like, I didn't know that there was a choice. I didn't know that there was a part of my mind that can be independent from the part of my mind that's creating the suffering. And what yoga eventually teaches us and shows us by experience is that, oh wait, I'm actually this witness. I'm actually this presence of observation that can observe these thoughts. And then at that point, it's like, okay, I choose not to do that thought anymore. And it still could come back. Like, oh, okay. How about now instead of that thought for this next 2 seconds, I just do this. And then you start to get more and more. And I'm not to say that's going to take it away.
Fair enough.
And it's also not, you know, what I'm about to say isn't a condemnation about these things, but, and there's a tie into most yoga as well, but you can get out of your head by drinking, you know, like five drinks. You can get out of your head by like drinking a bottle of wine or two. You can definitely get out of your head for a while. You get out of your head by doing certain drugs. You can get out of your head by binge watching Netflix. You can get out of your head by engaging in, you know, basically just doing a lot of different things. But a lot of those things have downfalls to them, and you're basically, the thoughts, the energy that creates the thoughts stays. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't dissipate at all. It just, you push it down with the distraction, and it just stays down until it resurfaces again. It can, I like to say it's like mold. It grows in the dark. So the first step is shining your awareness, I don't even need to say shining, sounds a little bit too fluffy.
I can dig that phrase.
But bringing your attention to the thought, and then you start to have more of an independence from it. And what, of course, the Miracles advises, and what I fully agree with is, what? Can you laugh at that? Oh, nice try. Oh, no thanks. So the other thing too is what a mistake we'll make, and this is essentially getting into. Are you familiar with Eckhart Tolle at all?
Yes.
Yeah. What Tolle and I think psychologists and spiritual teachers before him, I believe the term was most fleshed out by Carl Jung. The ego. It's the ego at work. That's the generator of that thought pattern feedback loop I was just referring to. But the tempting part is once you start to see that, okay, that's the thought, then there's a tendency to fight it. Instead of flighting it, then there's the tendency to fight it. And fighting it doesn't make it go away. Fighting it actually gives it more juice. Mm-hmm. So, again, what I do now more and more is that I just don't take them serious. I just don't take those thoughts seriously.
You've learned how to identify useful from not useful thought patterns and strengthening a pathway to. You use the example of using breath as a somewhat interruption. Mm-hmm. I'm detecting something unpleasant in my brain. Let me breathe, see if I can go to a Zen pond.
Just right to what's happening right now. Like,
yes,
this breath is happening right now, and my awareness is there, and so there's some freedom, there's some peace. Mm-hmm. I'm not. Everything else on the external is you can't drink a whole bottle of wine all the time. You can't blast music all the time. You can't watch an engrossing movie all the time. And then, like I said before, there's other downfalls of those things. There's no downfall to the breath. The breath is always you can't take a breath. You can't take a past breath. You can't take a future breath.
Right.
This is something you always have, and that's always in the present moment. And I don't know if I can articulate it, but if you don't believe me, those listening, is that a camera?
Yeah.
Okay, so I keep looking at it over there. So
that's okay. Yeah, the iPhone is shooting.
Yeah, but if you're watching or listening at home, just give it a try. Just try to take all of your attention to a breath, bring some sound to it, and just feel the effect. If you breathe in for 6 seconds or longer and breathe out for 6 seconds or longer. I don't know about you, but I immediately feel a little bit of I feel better. I feel better everywhere, in the mind and the body.
Right on. That was the business I was in when I found yoga, was just feeling better in the body and the mind. How do I deal with trauma through losing a family member in a bad way and just accepting it? You're not going to get over something like that. You're going to weave it into the fiber of your being and become a new version of yourself. Yeah. Using yoga and using breath was probably the single most relaxing thing to me. If I got overwhelmed or if I got anxious, even if I was at work, being at work was unfortunate because you'd be in a workplace where you're surrounded by coworkers and public people and you feel something that you don't want to be in a room feeling. You want to be like at home feeling. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And using breath to overcome those moments was really cool. I heard someone use beautiful phrasing when they said that human beings breathe enough to survive, but we don't breathe enough to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, actually thrive. You know, use your breath in a way that is powerful. It's a tool, you know. And I'm trying to do that exactly. I do rideshare driving as a gig right now in the city of Pittsburgh. That's what I'm doing, like Uber and Lyft.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And as a driver, you talk about road rage and stuff, like being in your breath, super helpful. I'm just accepting the moment of, yes, I'm in traffic. I'm just going to take this opportunity to do some nose breathing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 4 seconds in, 6 seconds in. I don't go crazy with breath work in the car because obviously I don't want to become lightheaded doing some kind of Wim Hof style breath technique.
I was just about to mention that.
Do you know what I mean?
I love
that cat is also, what's the word? A big proponent of what the breath can do.
He's a yoga master.
That's a good way of saying it.
He really is.
You know,
he's
almost
now like
mastering his body.
Oh yeah, I
in a
don't
way
talk
that
about
other
yoga anymore.
Humans are unable to master. The cat with his Everest feet.
Oh yeah.
You know, somewhat overcoming what a usual human would be overwhelmed by hypothermia. He's somehow not susceptible to it because his breath is forcing energy into his body, keeping him at a certain temperature.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. That guy is something else.
And guess what? In the third part of the Yoga Sutras, it talks about humans having those abilities, which up until Wim Hof, I mean, you'd hear about, you know, the yogis in Tibet, or you'd hear about these, you know, yogis who could like stop their heart rate or hold their breath for a ridiculous amount of time. You'd hear about those stories, but no one really believed it. Now Wim Hof is actually bringing it to science, and he's like, test me.
Yeah.
And they do. Mm-hmm. The most crazy one, I mean, I don't want to say crazy, but the most unbelievable,
mind-blowing.
Yeah, mind-blowing one is that he was able to prove that you can influence your immune system, too.
Uh-huh.
Did you hear about that
yes.
one? Yeah.
I watch some of his stuff on YouTube. He's a great dude.
Me too.
Sometimes I need assistance with laying down to bed. He has a good before-bed breath exercise where he does lay on a pillow and he uses a super forceful complete breath in, but he doesn't exhale all the way, and then complete breath in.
Yeah, so I do that in the morning. I do that in the morning.
Talk to me about the morning. The morning for me, especially after battling depression and grief and just trying to overcome, I go and what does a routine look like for me in the morning? Because morning is almost when I feel the heaviest.
Yeah.
I come out of this sleep, and it's usually just an uphill battle that first 30 minutes. And pranayama stuff, sitting on a mat, and Om is the first thing out of my mouth most mornings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's, what's the word? It's easy to be like, oh, what's this value you're trying to explain to me in breathing? But for those who haven't sat and actually taken 10 minutes of focused time to breathe consciously, you know, it sounds like way easier than it is. Let's put it that way. You know, I've got friends that I'll pitch to. Mm-hmm. Breath work is something I'm really learning that's helped me out. Maybe you should try it out. And then they're just thinking like, I'm breathing all the time, man. What are you talking about? It's difficult to outline some of the value of that. Do you find that breath is a key part of your morning? Do you go straight to movement?
Well, I mean, I'll give you a little capsule of what my morning, but I feel like it's one of the things that really changed my life because I was in bad patterns, and I would just I'd end up sleeping. I'd stay up too late. I'd sleep in too late. But now I'd just suggest I try to get 7 hours of sleep. Cool. And sometimes it's not possible, but at least try to get at least 6 hours. But and I also try not to stay in bed. You know, so it's like even if I didn't quite get 7 hours, okay, it's time to wake up. I try to wake up. What it changes was as we do daylight savings and whatnot. I try to wake up with the sun, or a little bit beforehand, but I get up and go to the bathroom for however long that takes, and then from there I try to just get into the routine. First I'll start drinking water. I like to. I'm not really that big on supplements, but I really like what is it called? Oil of oregano. I just feel like it really cleans everything out. So I just do a little bit of that, and then I'll start drinking lemon water, and then from there I just end up going into my. As much as I can, I'll try to do some movement. But if I know I'm going to a yoga class in the morning or afternoon, then I'm I don't really need to do too much. But I like to get the cobwebs out, to get the kinks out, and so typically I'll do if I got extra time or if I got the time, I'll do the 5 Tibetan rites. It usually only takes about 15 to 20 minutes. Have you ever heard of them?
I'm not familiar with it.
I might just describe them in a second, but they're a cool practice. It's on the internet. There's a book called "The Secret of a Fountain of Youth" that describes them. But they're just essentially 5. You could just even call them vinyasas or kriyas. It's just kind of moving from one pose to another, and they don't really even prescribe breath to have just breathing really slow. But I like to do it with breath. I like to do everything with prescribed breath. But anyway, I'll do that usually, and then I'll meditate for like I'll set my alarm for like maybe 15 or 20 minutes. I feel like I just need that amount of time, at least that amount of time. Again, if I'm like I don't have anything on, if I'm on vacation, you could do a half an hour to an hour.
Sure.
But now in my meditation, I found myself after trying to do it every single day. After a while, I just ended up entertaining my thoughts too much. Oh wait, breathe. But so now I'll intermix a pranayama every time I catch the thoughts like being too prevalent, and then I'll throw pranayama in, and then I like the word abide, just like abide in the energy of that, or the energy is a little bit too isn't clear enough, but just the feeling of that for a while.
I feel you.
But I end up doing the Wim Hof one the most, because that one has a huge, like I feel that immediately.
It's fiery.
Yeah, and I'm like holding my breath out for like 2 minutes. that's nuts.
That's pushing it to the extreme. And maybe one who's going to try that at
I'm
first.
Probably fudging the numbers. I'm probably fudging the numbers.
No,
I'm doing like a minute and a half.
I feel you though. I'm sure he does that kind of long range. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure one who's going to apply that practice is going to start low and then start expanding from there in terms of amount of duration, with holding breath in and out like that. But you're right that he's probably the best example of fiery breath, being a proponent of what breath can do, the way he's so openly invites scientists to figure out why he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, he's probably going to go down as one of the most important people in our time.
I think so. I can dig it.
He's already got a lot of notoriety. But anyway, I mean, that's essentially it. Then it's just like 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes meditation. Even if you want to try to start developing, I'm not saying you even personally, but anybody listening, set your alarm for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is something.
Yes. Yeah,
for sure. Get the phone away from you. Sit. You could just pay attention to how you're breathing. You could do the Ujjayi breath. That's good. And then every time you notice a thought, go right back to redirect your attention into the breath again. As many times as it takes. A lot of people will be like, oh, I can't meditate. My thoughts are coming too fast. Like, that's why you need to meditate. And that's part of the meditation, actually.
For sure.
The thought is the part where you come back from.
You can dig it.
If you just sit down and you're in a complete meditative state already, you're already there.
Yeah, you're on the line between like sleep
and
meditation.
But I fully recommend try to do it at least 5 minutes every day. It's like instead of dental, it's like you need to brush your teeth, you need to floss your teeth so that they stay healthy. It's a similar thing that you're doing for your mind. Call it mental floss.
I can dig it.
But yeah.
I like the phrase you used about the cobwebs. Cobwebs are definitely present in your muscles as much as in your mind. And
yeah, man.
Finding a way to shake them out and clean the space and air things out a little bit is the name of the game. And it's a daily battle because you go out and you lay down for your 6 or 7 hours sleep and you're going to tense up again. You got another day's worth of movement ahead of you. It's a cycle.
Yeah, it is. But I feel really fortunate because I think the reason I can do those advanced poses is that I've just kept doing yoga. I just nothing else. Like I never dedicated myself to anything like I have for yoga, and I can analyze the reasons why, but it's just been so great to do that. And it's like the thing with yoga is if you can keep it consistent, it's going to stay with you and you can keep progressing. If you can just stay consistent, doesn't even have to, even if you ended up doing it 20 minutes a day, try to do something every day.
Yeah.
And if you can't move every day, try to meditate every day. And that's it. I mean, I don't really have, from there it's just like whatever I have to do during the day, but that's just do that, lemon water, good to go. I'm good to go. I don't really wake up sore or anything like that. That's a good thing about yoga is you're stretching your body, and I do a lot of hot yoga too, which it's debatable, but I feel like there's extra power in that as well. And
Oh, yeah.
extra challenge, firstly,
Oh,
for your
yeah.
mind.
Oh yeah, those sauna-like environments have a lot of good science. behind
Yeah, the
them,
scientists are identifying some things that are present in saunas that are good for your body, but also present there. Heat shock proteins.
I was just gonna say, heat shock protein
works.
is the phrasing I've heard too. No, you're good. I've heard that same phrasing. You know, it's just about you, and you hear it. I mean, you look at what's the word? Let's look at like Romans, steam rooms.
Yeah.
That was a daily thing. You know, the Jewish community is huge into taking a schwitz.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a steam sauna experience was a daily thing. I'm sure that helps you wind down after a day like no other. I haven't been in a sauna. I can't remember the last time I was in a sauna.
But it clears you out too, and like I feel like there's been people like, oh no, there's no scientific evidence that you detoxify anything. I find that really hard to believe, but at least there's a feeling of that. I feel so clean after it too, because I'm like sweating everything out, and and then you take a shower after that, and you're just like, I don't know, and I feel like it's really good for my immune system too. I barely ever get sick, and but yeah, the morning isn't too complicated really, but just finding that extra time instead of dive bombing your phone as soon as you wake up.
That's definitely become normalcy for our world.
I know, and it's not. There's again, like I don't want to shame people, and I'm
no
not
judgment.
great. I'm not
No
great
judgment.
at it either. I end up getting that. I really feel like it's like an addiction too. Like I feel like
Oh, that's a proven thing for
But
sure.
that's
It's
the
a
thing,
dopamine.
too.
Oh, I got a text. Oh, I got a like.
Yep.
Oh, I got a comment. Somebody saved my post. Oh my
Exactly.
god. You know.
But you could just, even with that or anything else you're trying to practice impulse control with, yoga, especially mindful yoga, you train your mind to be able to find, even if you're like, okay, I'm not going to look at my phone right now, or okay, I'm not going to run to the freezer and grab the ice cream container right now. Maybe I'll do it in a minute. Or it's like the same thing, it's the same, you're training the same neural pathways in your brain where you're like, I'm sweating my ass off, my thighs are burning, but I'm going to stay in this. Let me just see if I can take it. Yeah, I can still breathe. I'm going to stay in this. Maybe I'll come out in a minute. Maybe I'll come, if he doesn't, maybe I will. Maybe I won't. We'll see. But you're interrupting that immediate, automatic reaction. And that's the same thing that also comes into play with your words and your behaviors too. Not just, impulse control, but there's impulse control when it comes time to starting or perpetuating an argument. I mean, some people are like, no, argument's good. No, a kind debate can be good.
Fair enough.
An argument, I don't think is ever beneficial. It's just trying to knock your opponent down. And usually, who are you arguing with the most? It's usually your loved ones. Those are the ones that
true.
And that, if that phrase is accurate, you're actually trying to go to war with. You're trying to defeat your loved one. That's not love.
This is a good point.
But we all do it. So that's when the impulse control, and that's where what you learn in yoga can really come into play. When it's the same. Like I was in a 7-8 year relationship up until a couple years ago, and it would just be like the same argument with just different little shades of different outfits on top of the argument. It would be like the same argument
just
every single time.
Disguised a little bit.
I say something that I didn't mean, and then she'll say that thing that just, and then I'll come back over the top. Or I can start putting the yoga into action and be like, no, what she said, I don't need to let that. I don't, and it's not. It's not like, no, I'm so powerful that she does. I don't care about what she said. Like it's a little bit of it. It's a different thing than that. It's just like, oh, that's where I'm just a huge advocate of namaste, because you see past that anger of the other person, and you see past that frustration of the other person, and you see past their words, and you just see them. You see you in them, and that's how yoga can really improve your life, and it can improve your relationships.
Yeah, you can apply it to all things. Like I applied it to being in traffic, being in the car. You're applying it to a partnership. Any aspect of your life. I had a passenger the other day that just got a kick out of the kinds of things I was saying, in our conversation. And she goes, well, where do you get your spiritual practice? And I was like, well, everywhere I go, I suppose. And she was like, well, where do you go? And I was just like, I don't currently invest in a business that is growing me spiritually, if that's what you mean, but it's an everywhere thing. In the car, across from you, feeding the dog, working with emotional partners, working with family and relative, humans that you're sometimes at odds with. Like you say, every moment is an opportunity to, what's the word? Know that it's not about defeating this person, changing their perspective. It's not an argument per se. We're just trying to be on the same page.
Yeah, and basically it's the ego trying to be right.
It loves to be right.
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be right for you to believe that it exists.
Yeah.
Or at least for you to believe that you need to rely on it. You don't. You only need to rely... Well, if you can just strip the ego part away from it, that part of your mind, you only need... You should ideally only use that part of the analytical, the critical, the judgmental, the self-preservation part of your mind when it's very needed. It's like, oh, I need... And then instead of being used by it, you're like, oh, I'm going to just pull this out real quick and figure out a math problem. And like, oh, okay, that worked really well, and now I'm back to the presence. You know what I mean? Instead of, you're just... It's like the difference of the dog wagging its tail or the tail wagging the dog.
Okay. Did you ever have a feeling in the timeline of your life where you felt like you moved out of this somewhat autopilot consciousness and into a more carefully controlled, I'm choosing this thought, I'm less, what's the word? Autopilot is the phrase that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Can you relate to something like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was all tied into what I call my spiritual awakening too, and it was all tied into
that point.
I was being taught this during the teacher training as well, and that's what I bring through in my teacher training. It's these mindfulness practices. It's the theory behind it, and it's like that's one of the many discussions I have at my teacher training is stimulus response. Put a space in between. Stimulus, gap, response.
I like it.
Instead of being autopilot. Now, it's interesting. I think about this a lot, especially when we're talking about the way I teach the Vinyasa Yoga. You're training your brain to almost, and with the Ujjayi breath, it's interesting too, is like I'll teach Ujjayi all the way through like the peak of the class, which is usually like a couple wheel poses, really, really peak, and then bring it down, and then I'll coach a new breathing technique. I like lose the Ujjayi breath. So try to pay attention. At this point, it almost became automatic or habitual that you're making sound at your throat.
Yeah.
So now it's like, okay, breathe just as slow, get as much air as possible, open your throat, don't make any sound. So typically you'll have a few people after a minute or two starting to do the Ujjayi breath again. So it's just like training the mind again to be present. So within a course of a really dynamic yoga class, and just like trying to live life more vibrantly and more peacefully and more present, you're going to have these times where it's like you're training your brain and your mind to be more present, to be more thoughtful, to be more kind. And eventually, it's to be more kind and loving. But eventually, that becomes your automatic, and that's okay. But there's still there's a difference between something happening and you're just not even aware of it happening at all, and a difference of like, oh, this is the path I've carved out over time, and yes, and I'm aware that this is happening. That's my that's now, and that's almost, it takes a while, or maybe it doesn't.
I'm sure it takes a while, and you're right that we all find our quote unquote awakening at different points. That's not a moment you're gonna go out and chase. That's a moment that's gonna find you.
So I think I may have said it earlier, but that's really what the awakening was, or that's what you were just the previous question you just asked me, where I started to be aware of my actions more. What was automatic, I came free from that. It was just like seeing that there's space between my awareness and my thoughts, and like I had never. It's hard to think back before that, but I'm pretty sure I had never had that experience before, at least consciously. I just always was driven by my thoughts, always. And then automatically acting. Well, if you really think about it on this level, thoughts beget more thoughts. So it's like automatic, more thought generating, so that there's space and you can interrupt that, and you can always pause before you speak. You can always pause before you act. But, yeah.
I like how the phrase awakening has been reused. I think it's an apt description.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling like you were asleep to something, whether it's you rose to a different level of consciousness or a different, kind of vibrational frequency. I'm now buzzing in the sense of knowing or loving or being or whatever you want to call it, as far out as that might sound.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful thing to be able to know that when I lay my head down, I'm grateful. This go around is an everyday thing. I should appreciate them all.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, too, is when you finally lay down all of those stressful attachments, when you finally start to like free yourself from the repetitive loops of thoughts and actions and the inherent stress that creates, what's underneath is peace. The peace is always there. And what I found, and this is what really made me feel like I was having a spiritual experience, is I connected to joy. I connected to unconditional love, which I feel is always there. And not to say I'm always like locked in on that level all the time.
Fair enough.
But I felt it, and I felt like I was in an elated state. Like I got it. It felt like something totally otherworldly was almost happening, and it was just a combination of like learning more about yoga and these techniques and actually doing it, and that's what like really broke through. And then it took like until about another till we're having this conversation. Now it's like you have the awakening, but then you have more work to do.
100%.
It's how to actualize it. It's how to make it stick more so. It's one thing to wake up. It's one thing to become present to what's going on. But then I don't know. I feel like it's still possible that some people can just have this like immediate, undeniable shift. But for me, it's taken a lot of work. It's taken.
Yeah.
I don't want to even say it was work, but taking a lot of discipline. And
it's a certain type of maintenance.
Yeah.
A metaphor I use all the time, most often in the context of my relationships with female partners, is love is like a garden.
Mm-hmm.
Our relationship is like a garden. I'm going to go to it. I'm going to take care of the earth. I'm going to plant seeds. I'm going to water the garden. Then nice things will grow. But I can't ignore it, or those things will die. Do you know what I mean? And there's a seasonality to it also. There's weather, stuff that I can't really control that does affect us and the conditions of in this context, a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
But taking the time to always be mindful of what I do has an effect on my garden.
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to be the type of partner that is throwing a tantrum and stomping around the garden and kind of damaging some of what has grown to be beautiful? So it's a tough thing, partnerships, for sure, whether it's romantic or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
But being on the same page and being, what's the word, I guess accepting and like compassionate to the fact that we're all trying our best.
Yeah.
We all have something that we're going through. We all have our burdens, but safety first, then teamwork, as they say. Let me ask you a question a little far out.
Sure.
On a somewhat wild topic of psychedelia.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a interview with this guy, Michael Pollan. Do you know Michael Pollan? He writes about nutrition a lot. He's usually the food guy when you buy his books, but he had released a new book.
Sounds familiar.
And went to talk with Joe on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Oh, I've seen it. I think I've seen it.
He talked about his interest and sudden infatuation with psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
So he arranged these, not exactly scientific experiments, but very planned expeditions that he was going to go on, where he was going to either take some ayahuasca or take some mushrooms, psychedelic psilocybin mushrooms, and record what he felt. Do you know what I mean? And he felt so profoundly affected that he took a step away from writing about nutrition and dedicated some time to it. And one of the metaphors he used was that when he was in his altered state, he felt like he could see the existing pathways of how he goes about thoughts and feelings as a ski slope that had been skied upon enough that it's now a groove that you can identify in the mountain. You know, and he's a guy of older age. I believe he's in his 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he's seeing all these trails that he's become so accustomed to. He's strengthened these pathways that have kind of been blazed into the mountain. They're so easily identified. When he goes into this altered state, let's call it mushroom trip, he found the whole mountain was covered in a fresh powder.
Mm.
And now he could be free to choose some alternative path that wasn't so heavily trod beforehand. Do you know what I mean? That's something that I dabbled in as a means of shaking things up when I was grieving.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? An altered state sounded great to me because my current state wasn't a great one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And it definitely led to some interesting stuff. You know, I wouldn't be the guy that rants and is a massive proponent of everyone must eat mushrooms to the whole world and everything will be better. I don't know that would be the case. I'm sure there are some folks that, you know, not have a great time, not get some value out of that. However, as far as like, you used the term ego before.
Mm-hmm.
My ego almost dissolves in a state like that.
Mm-hmm.
If I've eaten some mushrooms and I'm thinking about my feelings, and it's almost as if my feelings and my thoughts and my being are this waterfall that's always been running, and I'm now seeing it, you know. And it's okay to see that it's constantly running. That's a good thing, you know. I've got energy coursing through me. But to be mindful enough to not be sitting there crushed under the weight of this waterfall.
Yeah.
I'm behind it, kind of observing it do its thing. I'm sitting behind it, breathing, watching it, you know, being a witness, you know. Right on. It was one of those things that I was lied to about.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I had heard up to that point in my life felt very, oh, that's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It was put in such a bad light. There was a stigma to use of psychedelic as if I was a total degen, or I was going to go crazy. Yeah, right, and lose my mind, have a psychotic break or something. But
Which can happen.
Definitely. I'm sure...
if you're prone to it,
100%.
Be careful.
And then dosing is important.
Yeah.
You know? Buy a scale that's sensitive to the 100th of the gram and don't mess around.
Mm-hmm.
You know what you have in front of you. And you can always, whether it's mushrooms or whether someone's using cannabis, it's like you can always take another toke, but you can't untake a toke you've just taken. You know, you can't step back from some altered state, you know, but you could further it if you needed to, you know, baby steps with stuff like that. Moderation is the name of the game. That's a good point.
Wait an hour,
especially
make sure.
The things that you're eating. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm probably not an expert on the field as much an expert in the field as I am with the yoga stuff, but I think it's definitely a way. I feel like I did in the past. I have another huge story about it, but I don't really like to talk about it all that much. I think I'm gonna write a book about it one day.
I can dig it.
But
no pressure to share.
The first, like, just basically, like, I had like when I first broke into the awareness of I actually do love all people.
Yes.
Was in the wake of a psychedelic experience, but it was a very interesting story. I don't want to go too deep into it, but yeah, just in the wake of it, I had this moment where I think I had ego death. I didn't know what was happening at the time, but I think I literally blacked out or something. I was really dehydrated. I hadn't been like drinking or eating all day, and I was at a festival, and I think I just literally blacked out. But I came to, and I didn't really have a sense of my identity. Not for a long period of time, but for a while when I was trying
to kind of reabsorb.
I was like, oh, I need to get water. I don't even know who I am. Like what's I know I want to go and get $5 bottles of water right now and get out of the crowd. But it took a little bit to come to, and then when I came to, it was during a Flaming Lift show at Bonnaroo 2007. When I came to, it was like that metaphor you used as being behind the water fountain. It was like I was literally to the side of the stage, but it felt like I was seeing the show from like behind the scenes.
Cool.
And then that kind of translated to, everything. I'm kind of seeing everything behind the scenes, and then what it boiled down into was me just being like so. Again, like, oh my God, like I felt like I was like, this is what's actually true. This is the way I really feel. And like, I started like ranting and prophesizing. and writing down like just stuff along the lines of unconditional love, and they also had a spaceship on their in their show, so I was connecting a lot of it to the spaceship at the time. But
I can dig it.
So that was one mal marking. That was actually around the time I had done yoga for the first time too. It was 2007. So I don't know if that answered your question, but besides of which, I'm no authority on the matter, and I really don't. I haven't had that many experiences with it, and especially not in the past, 12 years.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Time rolls, man.
I would just also, from what I do know, echo what you'd said is, if you want to try hallucinogens, treat it seriously. It's not a party drug.
Right.
It's a lot about set and setting.
It's an altar that I go to occasionally. It's a well that I go to drink from occasionally. And I do know people. Reverence.
And I do know people who are more into the ceremony, and they do ayahuasca ceremonies, right, and they do what is it? Peyote ceremonies,
right.
And it's linked to Native American ceremonies, and I think that stuff's super legit too.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't speak to me very much.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But I'm not saying I won't roll out for the future, but I could suggest a person or two who could give you a lot more on that. That's not really my thing. Is like, I feel too is like, you don't need to do that. The thing about you can get similar consciousness with breath work.
Yeah.
You can get similar effects, and it doesn't last as long either. So you can come out of it and back into it if you want at will.
Right.
And like I said, I just advocate again, like, be careful if you are doing even mushrooms or acid or anything like that. Take half the recommended dosage at first. Yeah. Let an hour go by. Make sure
you respond to it.
And then I would also say, if you are prone to severe panic attacks, or you're prone to psychotic breaks, maybe don't do it at all.
Right.
Because that's, and also eating cannabis. If you
that's you eat it and it digests by your liver as opposed to smoking it. That becomes a mild psychedelic for sure.
Well, especially if you don't know the dosages. I've seen whole parties go down into a whole, like, you ever seen the movie Jacob's Ladder?
I'm not familiar with that.
It's a good movie, but like, there's a scene where just like everything goes to shit basically. And like, there's been a party where everybody had horrible experience. Someone, I don't know exactly what they did or how much they put in, but everybody went down a dark, yeah. And so, just be careful. That's my advice with all that stuff. I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all.
No judgment.
Just be careful.
Your point about set and setting is the thing you hear all the time.
Oh yeah.
Be in a safe environment
with people that you trust, or people that you feel pretty good about,
and in a space where if you needed some time to sit with yourself and have a cry or whatever it is, have some space to do so.
Yeah.
whether it's a closet or whatever. Give yourself a small,
not a rave.
Recap. A rave is probably a bad, it's one thing if you become a connoisseur of these things. You're going to incorporate it into your life a little bit more, maybe so. But that first few goes around, it's probably better to treat as a altar that you're going to go with a lack of understanding, hoping to gain some value, and have a reverence for what you're doing, knowing that it's almost impossible to quantify and measure what's occurring to you while you're in this altered state. You really can't know how someone is going to respond to that. One thing, though, that I found really interesting that I'll mention is Johns Hopkins did an extensive study with psilocybin, and the subjects that they used, this was like maybe the past couple years. I think I read it last year, so it was probably 2 years old now. The subjects were clergymen, priests, cardinals, all this stuff.
And they gave them mushrooms?
Yes.
Nice.
All of them had a shared report. In their report, they had a shared, vision, as it were.
A religious experience.
They all felt the family of man, just humanity in general. They all felt that connection. You used the phrasing earlier that I actually love all humans. Yeah. I grew up as a very introverted person, and I've slowly learned that there are moments when I need to, be, kind of isolated. And then there are moments where I'm going to go and be more social. However, use that phrasing that you had this moment where you realized you love all humans. Well, all these clergymen, after taking these scientifically weighed and dosed mushroom trips, not only felt the family of man in a stronger sense, but they saw Jesus. Literally had visions of Jesus, all of these guys. And I'm thinking like, wow, that's very interesting that they chose clergymen in the first place as the subjects and not just regular folks. These are folks who have made a career out of spiritual practice.
Right.
You know?
And
I
they
was
probably
whoa.
had more of a spiritual experience during that than they
Exactly.
may have had you can't
It's a
speak
good point.
across the board.
That's a good point.
There's a
But
lot
we're
of interesting
all leaves
things
on
in
the
that.
same tree. Do you know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
This is the way I feel when I'm in those states.
Yoga, that's the basis of it.
Right on.
And that's what it's trying to bring us back to, more of an experience of that. And what yoga philosophy and what A Course in Miracles and other spiritual like deep spiritual texts say is that we're having, and that's the term of awakening too, we're having a dream of separation. Like, it's very seemingly real matter, or thoughts behind the matter. This experience, you know, yeah, on one level it is real. But what I started, and I was atheist, I was a materialist. So I was like, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. You know, if there's no evidence, it doesn't exist. But like you were just saying, we're all, and this is what I've felt, and this is what, you know, it took me actually feeling it for me to believe it. And then it's like, you know, to accompanying practices to sustain the feeling, or, you know, just keep yourself on a nice level basis that where you don't get knocked into bad mental and physical modes as much. But it's all, we're all, I mean, I truly do, again, I can't be 100% certain of it, I guess. Maybe when I am, I'll drift into the atmosphere or something like that. But I'm just being honest. I think this is the case, that we're all actually together as one. You could use the word God at this point. You can use the word. I just like to interchange God with unconditional love, because that's how I experienced it.
I can dig that.
I was against saying the G word for a while, but you know, for some people, I just felt like we're all connected. And the Course in Miracles actually says, and this was a huge thing being raised Catholic, when I was just like, why does God let all this horrible stuff in the world happen? And what Course in Miracles says is, God's not. We're doing this. We created this universe to think that we could be separate from that part of ourselves, that God, and that's what actually created consciousness in the universe, and like consciousness in the way that we're actually having an experience. Not to say, you know, there's a better connotation of consciousness as well, but just consciousness in general, that we're aware of a life. But yeah, that's what I believe now, or at least I strongly suspect that that's the case, and we're just having, and you keep getting all these different things that point towards it. You got Buddhism, you got, I don't know, you got some of the greatest minds in science now saying, oh no, we're in a hologram. We're in a holographic universe. In a simulation. I think that's what I meant to say. And like, yeah, well, that's saying the same thing as what I'm saying too. They think that there might just be, I don't know, an alien or an advanced human race running a simulation, or several. I don't know, but it's just, I think it's just a metaphor.
I can appreciate that.
Or that could literally be the case as well. But at some point,
fair enough. Yeah,
simulations within simulations within simulations. At one point, there is an actual. I guess, I don't know, would it even be carbon? It might not even be carbon-based life form. Some sort of life form running the simulation. But again, like, I don't know, that could be. You don't have to. We don't have to figure it all out.
There are some things we might not know.
Yeah,
and that's okay. That was a point of surrendering to the not knowing. You know, I was facing my mortality as I was going through the grieving process, and I'm sitting there going, kind of, I gotta accept it. As much as this man was 57 when he passed, it's like, my clock is ticking. We're all moving in that direction. You know, it awaits everybody, and so to have a certain relationship with the idea of death, in the sense of, yes, there's not a whole lot I know about that. No scientist to date can detect and measure what happens to these folks that have near-death experiences, where they're dead on an operating table for 6 minutes and then they come back. What did you see? Well, I saw a light.
I felt peaceful.
Felt peaceful. Peaceful and a light is good for me, man. If there's light and peace, it sounds like a place I want to be.
Yeah.
I always use this phrasing that having overcome some of that, what's the word? real dark stuff and just kind of weaved it into the light and learned to illuminate all of the parts that exist, even the ones that have been through the rigmarole and the ringer, is that death is often feared, and I don't think there's any reason to fear it. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be not just a beginning, but a revealing.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And although I might not get all the answers in the amount of time when I'm, let's use reincarnation as a thing, if I get filtered out of my meat body and into the absolute of existence, the oneness, and then eventually, let's say I go into another body, that brief respite in the oneness is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
It's going to be nothing short of awesome.
Yeah.
You know, and I get that because we can't measure for sure what it's going to occur, that there's some fear to be grown there, you know, and obviously I relate, you know, I'm in no hurry to meet my end, but I do feel like it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's good. I like that a lot. I'm going to think about that more so. I still feel like there's, you know, definitely, I'd be honest, I still have fear of death or the unknown, or I guess whatever it may be, and I think a lot of us do. But yeah, that's a good way. It's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, and again, maybe I'm bullshitting myself. Maybe I'm saying it's going to be awesome and it's not great at all. You know, but
you can't
that's
know
okay.
for sure. But
I
in the
will roll
meantime,
those dice.
Let's have as much light and peace
100%.
during the living time as well. But yeah, the other thing about the study of John Hopkins for the monks on mushrooms.
Yeah, right.
There's something else that came up. We talked. I lost it. That's all right.
No worries.
The religious experiences. Yeah, I don't know. I think I addressed the one thing I needed to.
No, I feel you. I think I saw something recently today that was about old folks. Literally anyone over 50, but especially I think about my grandparents. I only have one remaining grandparent named Bob, and he's awesome, dude. Just turned 87. And he's just at this point in his life where he knows that his body is nearing its expiration, but you talk with him and it's just wisdom. He oozes wisdom. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And having a more comfortable, somewhat improvised conversations with my passengers of that age too has been a wellspring for me. I get excited when I see that I'm picking up an old person because they have played the game longer than me. They have way more XP than me. You know what I mean? They're prestiging out, you know. Not to use video game terminology, but they've just played so much.
You lost me at prestiging out.
They've gone to a
XP.
new level. You know, they've played through and they've played through. They're on their, let's call it 87th playthrough. You know, he's got 87 years under his belt. How can I compare that to my experience? It's very different, obviously, but I've really enjoyed my talks with him. I hope to get a microphone in front of him sometime soon and have a conversation. And just old folks in general, I guess what I was driving at was that it's almost like the universe knows, because these folks are only around so long, when they get the opportunity to share with people, the right stuff comes through them. Whatever I need to hear, it seems, is what he's telling me. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's a stranger or my grandfather.
Yeah, you can kind of look at that. It might be interesting to kind of look at that about anything. But
I can dig that.
Yeah, also, though, especially, you know, you can also look at like a vinyasa yoga sequence as a metaphor for a lifespan. I mean, you start in child's pose and you end up in corpse pose. So usually the poses leading up to corpse pose are more relaxed, more open, longer held, so more time to like let that essence through. So yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I still like, I think I got some prejudices or biases against like the grumpy old people that I've had, but I mean, even that said, their grumpiness can be like, oh, that's what I needed to hear right now. Yes. You know what I mean?
Yes. Sometimes those curmudgeon type cats are like a wellspring. You know, they've got a bullshit meter that is on lock. You know what I mean? They almost smell it before you say it.
I worry about my bullshit meter sometimes. I feel like it might be too low. But,
no, that's a good thing to be assuming positive intent with everyone that you meet. My goal should not be to tear you apart or to find and pick holes in your point of view. I want to share I want to, whether you're from a different culture or from a different town or whatever the case may be, you've been through something that I can learn from.
Yeah, man.
Fact. That's all I want to do is teach and be taught.
Yeah, like that reminds me of the other thing that from the monks too. That's the practice of namaste. It's like even if someone's bringing some anger at you, you see past it and you see that part, if you need to, even sometimes I feel like I just skip ahead to just pure unconditional love or just like acceptance of the situation. But if you need to, if someone's yelling at you even or something, you can just be like, oh, haven't I ever felt that way? Haven't I ever done that to a person? So you find compassion in that similarity, and then from there it opens it up, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, you're the part. We're the same person, and you're just having these different chemicals firing in your brain right now that from your experience, from probably bad experiences you had or whatever the case may be. And that's what I wanted to say about the monks is like just the practice of unconditional love in general is that you don't actually have to necessarily like everybody. You don't have to like want to make out with everyone. You don't have to have a 2-hour conversation with everyone.
Yeah.
What you have to do if you want to be at peace is just to be at peace around that person. Yes. Or there's a difference between unconditional love and liking. Liking's more, it can be influenced by your higher mind. And what I found, that's the other thing I say, is the more I practice unconditional love, the more I like people too.
Yes.
But, there's still certain people that I'm just like, okay, now it wouldn't be great for me to engage with this person right now, but I wish them the best and I'm moving on.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, always wishing the best. One of my favorite artists, Jim James, is in the poster there, although his face is very
Is that My Morning Jacket?
For some. He's from My Morning Jacket, yes.
Yeah.
This is an artwork from a solo record that he put out under the name Jim James. So he makes records with the band and records as Jim James, too. He has this, it's Eternally Even is the name of the record.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember specifically what I was getting at with Jim James. Quite all right. But
difference between loving and liking, maybe?
Yeah, he has this phrase where he'll say, I really wish you the best in this world and beyond. Mm-hmm. It's like all the love. What you're going through is not about me, you know what I mean? Whether it's a partner. In the context of the song I'm thinking of, it was a relationship,
mm-hmm.
He says something like, there's only so many ways to look at a given situation, and I wish you all the love in this world and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
If you can walk away from a partnership feeling that way, you're winning.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I worked on this garden with you for a while. It's not currently growing. We're walking away from it. We're going to go find new gardens. But hey, I appreciate you.
Yeah. And I mean, that could even be in a microcosm of just like people that you just have random interactions with, or, someone that isn't that big of part of your life, this. And from experience, it's made a real difference in my life. Like, I didn't talk much about this yet in this conversation, but I was before yoga, and especially like my late teens, early 20s, I was miserable. I was the opposite almost of the way. I was stuck in darkness, stuck in depression, and stuck into like I thought I hated people. I thought so there's like a couple people that are okay. But I used to just go around like, oh, everybody's so stupid. Oh, that person. And like, it was just me. It was parts of me that I didn't like that I was projecting into other people.
I can appreciate that.
And it's been a huge difference. And it's like, there's a lot of talk about shadow work and whatnot. I feel like, I don't know if I'm spiritual bypassing it, but I feel like was in the shadows for so long. And like, I saw, the darkness of that you can kind of create. So I was in it long enough to truly realize that I don't want to, that's not the way I want to be. I don't want any of that. I don't want any parts of that anymore.
Yeah.
So, I don't know why I brought that up, but yeah.
Your point about namaste in a moment where someone's maybe angry at you or arguing with you or whatever the case may be, chastising a male partner for X, Y, or Z reason.
Yeah.
Okay? Responding to that in a way that's very like, what's the word? I see what you're going through, and I've been there too. Whether it's anger chemicals fueling you to say something you don't mean, just kind of relating. It reminds me of what does that remind me of? you think about Christ with the whole, turn the other cheek. Someone punches you in the face. Let's say it's a verbal moment. They wound you verbally. What is the equivalent of turning the other cheek in that moment? Taking the hit and saying, I love you so much.
Yeah.
How do you reply with unconditional love in a way that might diffuse a person who is trying to verbally wound me?
Well, the thing is like usually it's something that just comes in the present moment too. You can have a couple different strategies for it, I guess. One strategy might be, I'm just not going to say anything back, but in a significant other relationship too, that can even be more infuriating for the person if you're like, well, you're not saying anything back. But or you could just say, oh, you just said that to me. Okay, I still love you anyway. You know what I mean? You could, like those are decent strategies.
Even if you just acknowledge that it was hurtful. Hey, I just got hurt by what you said. Despite that hurt, know that I don't hold that against you.
But again, care about you might not even say. You could just be like, I feel like sometimes too. I would just go,
yes, ouch.
Like, oh, did you really? Okay. Something like that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, it's like Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about this too, is sometimes when we're on a spiritual path and we're starting to waking up, it'll sometimes draw the ego out of people even more so who or are about to wake up, or if they're not waking up at all yet. Tolle has some interesting stories about that. And he also goes on to say that the more active part of our ego, the more pain, the more suffering creating part is called the pain body. And so that sometimes you'll get that fired at you from people sometimes. But I just, ideally I don't want to face that stuff in a day. But if I do, as best I can, I try to, respond with peace and love. Not to sound too much like a hippie.
No, I mean, Ringo Starr all the way, man. Peace and love. Ringo's a great advocate for peace and love. I love to be the Ringo of my family, as it were. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think of a phrase where I would love to attribute it to the correct person, but I believe the person I heard say it, Dr. Chris Ryan, was attributing it to someone else. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he could remember either. But I heard Chris Ryan say that we reveal our deepest secrets through our loudest accusation.
Mm.
So you have a partner accusing you of X, Y, or Z, and most of the time, there might be a legitimate end to that accusation, but sometimes there isn't. Sometimes you're sitting there totally secure in whatever it is you're doing. Person accuses you. Mm-hmm. It's like, I have to understand that sometimes that's more about them than it is about me.
Yeah.
And just accepting the fact that I might get hurt feelings through verbal, transfer. But there's no harm in that unless I give it the ability
to. Unless you give it that energy, and then you can also be like, okay, I'm not attaching to that.
Exactly.
I'm not attaching to
Easier said than done, but
definitely. And that's, again, when a dedicated meditation and yoga practice is in your life, I wasn't ever able to do that previously. Now I'm able to do it much more often. I had something. Chris Ryan. And that all goes down what you just bringing up, to find compassion and to find connection with, even if it's not like your significant other or family member, even like a public figure who is triggering you. You can just be like. So even like you can even take it to like a really extreme example. Well, first I'll go to a non-extreme example. Okay. This is all about how, like you were just saying, there's something within us, what that quote was alluding to. There's something within our minds that we don't want to face and heal from. So by we, the ego, then instead it denies it. It blocks that there is some sort of fear, there is some sort of connection and association and identification with whatever that thing is, and it finds a target to project that out upon. That's called denial and projection. What was I also going to say about that? Kind of a more of a funnier situation with that is like the statement is, I hate my sister, she's so judgmental.
Judge my sister.
Yeah. So that's something that you might hear somebody actually say.
Yeah.
But I like that one because it pretty much illuminates what I'm talking about there. It's like wait a minute, And then even something more like a serial killer. How do you find peace around that there being a serial killer? The thing is, how denial and projection works, it doesn't have to be the seeming equal thing. Like, you don't have to have ever killed somebody, like murdered somebody, taken their actual life, to be denying something. And this is the first yama of the Yoga Sutra oh, I lost my train of ahimsa, which is non-harming. It doesn't just speak about your actions. It speaks that thoughts, words, and actions are all forms of it.
Okay.
So in this sense, this example of denial and projection, so you don't actually ever have to murder somebody to be denying something that's triggering you about this serial killer. Instead, you may have just physically hurt somebody before, or you may have just verbally hurt somebody. And there is a connection between the words that you say and the physical level. So, or you may, I don't know, there might be some people out there who will deny this, but have you ever, I think almost everybody's like, had a murderous thought before. Not to say that you were actually planning out a murder, but I just could kill that person right now.
Right.
So that's an example of, even it doesn't, having the only thing that separates anybody who admits to having had that thought, oh, I could just kill that person right now, or I want to really hurt that person right now, and a murderer, is you just had that extra little bit of wherewithal not to actually do that thing.
Right.
And they actually did that, and that leads towards finding compassion. Have I ever had a thought like, okay, you know what? And in a really real sense, we're all just, if you had a slightly different brain chemistry, and if you had the same experiences of that other person, you would probably be doing the exact same thing that they're doing.
Interesting.
So those are all just things to find that compassion, find that namaste.
Yeah.
And beyond that, to let go of the stress that is induced by saying, the big target is Donald Trump.
Easy target.
Yeah, really big fat head to target at. But do you want to feel anger? Do you want to feel rage? And like there's a little, just like the dopamine hit of checking your phone, there is some dopamine. There is some, they call it six out. You get a boost.
Oh, yeah.
when you yell at somebody, when you get angry. But it has probably, I don't want to quantify it, but it has at least equal amount of downfall to it, but probably a lot more. There's probably a lot more downfall to it. It's just like maybe doing like a bad hard drug too. There's going to be a quick high, and then there's probably going to be a lot of negative ramifications after the fact.
Right on.
So it's the same thing. So these are all things I am covering in my teacher training. So if anybody listening out there is like, especially if you're a Vinyasa yoga teacher already and you haven't really been exposed to any of this stuff, or you just really want to be able to lead a class with more precision and really start to get these transformative experiences that we've been speaking about in your class, give it a go. Check out michaelmiracles.com/teacher training and learn more, and just contact me. I'd like to talk more. There's still time to sign up. And you can even sign up. I scheduled the weekend session so that you'd only have to actually take 7 of the 8. So even if you sign up on the second session, we can still bring you in through this full 200 hours. So that's my little final plug.
No worries, man. I can tell you that anybody in the city of Pittsburgh that would come and talk and work with you, whether it's in a teaching training or teacher training or otherwise, is going to get a fresh perspective. You're not a common cat to be sitting across from.
Thanks, I guess.
Yeah, no, this is a compliment. I mean, this is a compliment.
It's interesting too, and to be honest, like I don't have a lot of people signed up right now, so it's like it's interesting. I have that part of me like, I need to be successful at everything I do, and to me, there's first with the music career, and then even teaching yoga classes. Like I have this I'm aware of it. I'm still,
Yeah.
you know, trying to deal with it. This need or this want to have a lot of people show up for my
Sure.
thing.
Yeah.
And
I can appreciate that. For
and
sure.
then you get that whole thing like, oh, these people have so many more people in their training. What's wrong with me, or what's wrong with the people not signing? So I just keep telling myself it's going to be exactly the way it is, even if it's like 3 people.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And the right thing will happen.
Yeah, and the people who need to be there at that time are going to be there, and then hopefully more and more as I keep doing it every year, the more and more people are going to be like, you know what, this is something that's going to help me, because I think it will. And I don't want to, you know, there's probably little bits of a lot of trainings that you can spark these things, but what I can offer, what I can bring through is quantifiable methodology. Is like, this is going to help you teach better in these mindfulness and spirituality discussions. At least it has for me, and I've seen it work for a few other people in the last training. It seems that transformations has happened to the participants. These things are really useful, and there's a lot of people are talking about these things nowadays too, and I love that. But you know, let's do it together.
Absolutely. Teamwork.
So do you have anything else? I think it's starting to feel like
No, I mean, that feels like a good spot to wrap it.
Yeah.
I like that you plugged your thing again. 100%, man. I can reiterate that the brief, I did a 30-day $30 at Yoga Hive, and I got so much value out of the classes that I visited of yours when I was there.
Yeah, if you're looking to do more yoga, people out there, go and hit up the different studios intro special if you haven't been there yet. And that's the way to do it. You could get at least 2 weeks, maybe a month, for about $30 at all the different studios, and then check out, see if it's working for you, and see which studios you like the best. If you want to, actually, one more plug, if you want to check out my classes, go to my website as well. My schedule's on there, michaelmiracles.com.
Right on, man. Man, there's one thing that came to my mind before we end. Is
Sure.
Have you ever heard of the Toltec wisdom or the 4 agreements?
4 agreements, yes.
Okay, cool. So one of the things in the 4 agreements, the first agreement, as it were, is be impeccable with your word.
Mm-hmm.
Impeccable in the sense of choose your words very carefully. Don't use them against anyone, especially yourself.
Yeah.
You know, they make... You always hear the term curse words.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes it's called cuss words, but curse, I think, is the right description.
Yeah.
If I'm going to use profane language in a judgmental or offensive way to somebody, I'm cursing them a little bit.
And yourself at the same time.
Yes. I'm casting actual energy, whether I can't see it or measure it, or let's call it, you know, a wave, a frequency that I've now sent their way that is going to have an effect. It's like if you go to swing set. You don't even get on the swing, you just push it. That one push that you gave it, it'll sit there and take quite a long time before it stops. You know, eventually, 2 minutes later, it's probably still, and then eventually it totally is back to before you touched it. Words can be
unless you touch
more
it again
powerful.
And keep pushing. That's what we end up doing, is we keep pushing it.
We keep pushing it. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk. Being impeccable with your word is what we're trying to do. You know, we're trying to spread unconditional love with whether it's practice through yoga and teaching it, or whether it's just a conversation.
Yeah.
That's the goal. Unconditional love. Never offend. Reduce suffering where we can. You know what I mean? That's my theme. I'm in a season of reducing suffering.
Yeah.
In my own life and in my close friends' lives and in my strangers that I meet along the way.
And I think more and more people are waking up to this too.
Right on.
I don't know how it was in other time periods, but
that's true.
It seems like simultaneously things are getting worse, but also getting better. So it's like this exciting time to be on the planet, I guess.
Absolutely. I feel lucky to be here. You know. High five. Thanks, man.
Let's do a better high five.
Yeah?
There it is.
I like it. Nice sperm clap there.